he has to explain something about designing our linguistic landscape. First, lessons in language planning. With these few words, I leave this arena to Professor Vivian Singh to start with this lecture. Now, Professor Vivian Singh. I also thank the administrative members of the Mozhiyiyal Sangam and the organizer of this series of lectures for giving me this golden opportunity to introduce the great linguistics of our nation to this august audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Renuka Devi, for a very generous introduction. I hope I'm audible to the people who have taken trouble to hook on to Zoom for this talk. And I'm particularly grateful to Professor Karunakaran, the president and the brain behind this whole event, and several others who have taken trouble to organize this. My talk today is about the linguistic landscape of India. How exactly can we learn the lesson? I'm sure we have all noticed that after World War II, there have been many, many new nations, many nation states, and as they were trying to build their countries, they understood that they need to address the issue of languages and culture. We had a constitutional decisions to make about our languages. How do we protect and promote our multilingualism? So freshly out of the conflict situation, we were all looking for ways to establish peace and tranquility and equity. But as we all know, it's not just a question of India. It's India, Nigeria, Uganda, Tanzania, everywhere. The whole linguistic terrain is very uneven. So it was the great responsibility of the initial political leaders immediately after World War II to decide what should their linguistic landscape look like. So that's the question with which they began. Now, in most cases, the decisions were made from top. The decisions were made from central government. Until a time came when there was resentment from bottom. Now, I'm particularly referring to the agitation for recognition of separate statehood for Andhra. And we all know that we had to lose very important people like Potti Sriramulu for that. There was also agitation to have a separate statehood for Maharashtra, a separate statehood for Karnataka. So there were ground level agitations. So a decision was taken quite often from the central government, from the top about languages. And quite often there are agitations from bottom. So there's a pressure from the top and the pressure from below. And the countries had remained engaged in resolving this conflict between the top and the bottom. Now, what were the options before us? One option before us was to decide that the society is left as a stage for competition. Whoever will fight, whoever will succeed, whoever will win, it is their problem. This is one option. The other viewpoint is that we look at the whole thing as a system in terms of systematic unity, so that people from diverse cultural background, diverse linguistic background can all be together. Now, we begin with some premises. As you all know, India writes in so many languages and speaks in so many voices. We are all aware of that. India, which is also called sometimes Bharat, in the Indian name, we have always absorbed numerous thoughts, practices, and speech. This is something which the world leaders, anybody who knows India or South Asia in general, they're appreciative about. That here it has given birth to so many religions, so many philosophies, so many ideas. Since independence, as we all know, through the census mechanism, as well as through other mechanisms, through constitutional provisions, multilingualism has been promoted. Multilingualism has been protected. Nobody said that in India, there should be only one flag, one party, one language, one culture, one dress, one food habits, nothing of that sort. Everybody has right to practice their own languages, their own culture, their own societies, social habits, etc., etc. However, the fact remains that we have a lot more to do. We have to promote our intercultural dialogue, and particularly we have to take care of the smaller languages of India. Now, I would request you to look at this interesting statement made by the former national professor, Suniti Kumar Chatterjee. As you know, Chatterjee was highly respected both in North India as well as in South India, East India as well as West India. He was a true representative of the Indian languages and somebody who could speak in 35 languages. And I've been privy to some of his talks in many, many other languages. I ran from here to there with my father quite often to listen to Chatterjee. And he had made a very interesting comment about India in this context. He said that in India, after an initial period of hostile contact, finally, all the communities settle down for a peaceful commingling. Cultural fusion as well as racial fusion. And that is something which is very strange about India. Therefore, he called it a land which has a harmony, which shows a harmony of contrasts. Now, this is very interesting. Whereas the Nehruvian policy was talking about unity in diversity, Chatterjee talked about harmony of contrasts. What a beautiful way of putting it together. Now, what did India do? India went for the second option, that is tolerance, the option of tolerance, option of promoting, protecting pluriculturalism and multilingualism. So I would say, and I would agree with Lakshman Khubchandani in this context, that India has been standing on a plurality square, on the crossroad of language, literature, culture, and social practice for several millennia. But throughout this history, we have been negotiating among ourselves, blending various, sometimes opposite viewpoints, experimenting in many ways in speaking, celebrating, singing, dancing, living, and performing in all aspects of life. I give you one example, because the India was not really the kind of India which is today. In ancient times, India comprised also the areas in Bangladesh, in Pakistan, in Nepal. It's a large country, up to going way up to Burma and down south, even towards Sri Lanka. So this kind of scenario, look at this situation where the Malla kings of Nepal used to organize theaters, performances. And in these performances, the plays were written by the people from Mithila, my own language, native language, Maithili. These plays were in Maithili. The songs were invariably from Karnataka. So there were Kannada songs. And the performers, the dancers, always came from Telangadesha, Telugu speakers, dancers. So here is a situation where a king is from Malla dynasty in Nepal. The language of performance is Maithili. The songs are being sung in Kannada, and the dancers are from Telangadesha, Telugu. What a beautiful scenario. This is something which is not decided by language planners. This is something which is decided from the bottom, from the people down. Now, when we talk about landscaping or linguistic landscaping, how does it work? Let me explain that. I'm sure there are some people among us who are very good in architectural designs, and they would remember that there are 7 principles in architecture, 7 principles in this landscape. They say that when you want to actually decide on landscaping, you have to make it simple. There should be a variety. There should be a balance. There should be a proper emphasis. There should be a good sequencing, then scale or proportion, and finally, there should be a complete unity of design. Now, I've given some comments on the screen here for those who want to go into detail at a later point of time. But the basic idea is that don't really, when you want to plan for a building, for a space, don't make it very complicated. Make it simple. The idea should be simple. And at the same time, there should be various things. When you are actually drawing up some design, when you are actually doing a painting, when you're doing a landscaping, there should be different things of different shapes, sizes, and forms. But among them, there should be a good balance. And then you decide which one you want to accentuate, where you want to put your emphasis. Now, we all traditionally know that a great language like Tamil has been doing yeoman's service to the entire world by producing fantastic philosophical texts, religious texts, literary texts, music, etc., for so many thousand years. Now, if I'm planning for entire India, when I'm deciding where are my accents going to be, obviously one of the important accents is going to be in Tamil. Similarly, an accent is going to be on Hindi, which is understood by a large number of people. So there are languages which automatically become candidates for attracting this emphasis. Then when you are actually arranging something, there has to be something in sequence and scale or proportion. And finally, the entire language-driven country should look like a unified whole. I think this is very crucial. Now, I would say that this entire country, India, has been going through 3 different stages and 3 different tendencies it is showing. It is showing a tendency of assimilation, tendency of merger, and tendency of split. This is very interesting that we have lots of ups and downs throughout our political history, cultural history. We have also seen one of the theories is that the whole space was inhabited by the negrotoids who eventually vanished, leaving only traces. And by the time the Indo-Europeans came from outside, who were themselves, in a way, within quote, barbarians, they were themselves nomads. We already had in India the other communities, the Dravidas, the Nishadas, and the Kirantas. So these newcomers naturally went into clash with these people, trying to conquer and win over them. So Chatterjee has a very interesting description to make, and he says that initially these Indo-Europeans basically were very weak in number. Not that they were numerous, but they had the inner vitality. They had superior, strong organization, strong discipline, perhaps better warfare instruments, that is, better fighters, and ability to withstand trouble, go on. Whereas people already, those who inhabited India, were people who were peaceful, who were culturally very significant, who were engaged in literary activity, drawing, designing, music, and all those things. So there was an attempt from the Indo-Europeans to not only come and win over, but also to impose their languages in the entire space. So we had languages like Sanskrit coming in. Eventually, what has happened was that we all know in linguistics, nothing stays permanently stable. A language keeps on changing from time to time, from place to place, from generation to generation. As a result, the Indo-Aryan itself or Indo-Iranian itself got split into so many different families and so many different languages. So the eventual result today is that we have so many Indo-Aryan languages, and then there are, of course, the earlier ones, so many Dravidian languages and Austric languages and the Kiranta languages. Now we are all aware of the range of multilingualism in India. 1576 nationalized mother tongues, 1796 other mother tongues, 122 languages, 22 in the constitutions, which cover roughly 96% of our space. So they cover a lot of space. Another 20 Austric and 98 Sino-Tibetan languages make up 2%. We know that we have Sahitya Academy, which gives away awards in 24 languages. Those 22 in the constitution, plus English and plus Rajasthani. We have magazines and newspapers published every day, every week in 101 languages. Radio programs were used to be in 146. In the recent interaction that I had with All India Radio, they said that now we beam in 176 languages. And there was already a survey which was conducted by Padmanabhan and McConnell and Mahapatra, which said that 50 languages are there which have a lot of literary vitality. Now you know where to put the accent. These are the 50 languages where the accent will be put. In the schools, NCERT reports tell us that there were 69 languages, now 33. And we know that roughly 69 to 71 languages are facing the threat of extinction, endangerment. Now we have 14 writing systems, but then in total writing systems will be 66. If you look at the 1901 census, 1951 census, 1961 census, which were not all comparable, truly speaking, these figures kept on changing. Now, where should we put our attention to? One of the important tasks ahead is that there are a large number of speakers of Indian languages who seem to be like this bird in the cage, longing for freedom. This freedom, unfortunately, is available only to a few fortunate fellow Indian speakers of languages who are represented in the Indian Constitution. Now, those of you who are looking at the market situation, please see that in the market, there are first layer, there is 8 languages. These 8 languages have a lot of publicity, sales, lot of visual impact in the cities, the way the signboards are written, Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Malayalam, Bangla, Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati. If you look at these are on the first top layer of languages where the languages, the films are made, where these languages are doing very well. But then there are other languages which are not far behind. I mean, Odia is not far behind. There are other languages which are catching up very well. Punjabi is doing very well. So there are second layer of 8 languages, and then there are last layer of 8 languages, the latecomers. Those languages which were recognized by the constitution much later. Languages like Santali, like Bodo, and other languages. Now, as stakeholders of education, what can we do? I think what we can do is that we should bring in some changes in our entire language landscape so that these languages which are less practiced, smaller in size, do not disappear from the entire scene. They should also be available in our schools, in our various avenues. So cultural context and creative writing, all these are very important. Now, I talked about Khub Chandani's Plurality Square. I'm sure you remember, some of you who listened to me earlier will remember the design of Khub Chandani in his book, which we published under the Sage. And this book is called Revisualizing Boundaries. And in that boundary in the book, you look at the 4 squares: language, culture, society, and literature. As a language planner, as somebody who's interested in linguistic landscaping, you bring in any change in any one of these, there'll be repercussion elsewhere. And this is very interesting that Indian entire space is linked up like this. And we know that our texts have been traveling. We have Mahabharata available in so many languages in India. We have Ramayana available in so many languages in India. I have seen people working in Bihar on the story of the Dalits who work on Lorikayan. And suddenly you go to Rajasthan, you find there's another story called Chandayan, which sounds very similar. The songs are sounding very similar. So our texts have somehow been traveling. We don't know how they're doing it, but they are traveling across time and across space. And this is something which is already available in the Rig Veda. In the Rig Veda, there's a question which is addressed by the authors of Rig Veda. I don't know. I do not want to claim who created, who constructed this text, but there is a question: who created language? And the answer that is given in Sanskrit is Yatra Dhira Manasa Vacham Akrita. It is the wise who in their wisdom have created language. Now, what do you do with this language? This is also another question which was asked. And the answer that is given is that it is through speech that friends see and recognize each other and mark their friendship. Now, this is something which sounds like the symbol that you are using here for your organization, which says that protect the language and develop the language, because it is the language through which you can protect and promote your friends. Now, best example of this is coming from Mahabharata. We all know Mahabharata was authored by Krishna Dvaipayan Vyasa. And if you ask me frankly, I would say that he was perhaps the most important and ancient folklorist, because he'll put us to shame, because he has woven stories which he gathered from so many places, from Manipura to Kandahara. You know, Gandhari came from Kandahara, which is now in Afghanistan, as you can see. It's a mega text. Mahabharata has so many multiple nestings. And what did Chatterjee say about Mahabharata? He said, if you do not mind the color prejudice, he said that he is somebody who is from the dark race, had a Brahmin father, but a Dasa mother. Satyavati was the mother. And probably Satyavati was born partly Aryan, partly Austric family. And there is a provision, there is a possibility that the grandmother was a Chandala woman. Now look at this situation. You are breaking down all the caste barriers. Your oldest, most sacred, which today many people will try to claim Brahmanical text. It's not Brahmanical. It's a text where the stories are stories about people from all walks of life, different castes, communities, different areas, regions. This is a great example of convergence. I'm sure during the Sangam time in classical Tamil, or during writing of the Vachana text in medieval Kannada, similar things happened, that people came from different castes and communities, and they all contributed their might to create beautiful texts. So language and literature in India, literary texts in India, have always been building bridges. They have never stood as barriers. They have acted in India as means to access the other cultures. Those of you who remember Shishir Kumar Das's 2 volumes of modern literature published by Sahitya Academy, where 22 of us were editors of the volume, just see that the first novel comes up in Bengali in 1801, Raja Pratapaditya Chorit. Within a year, it's available in Marathi translation. Now you can ask me, sir, how did it happen? How is it that somebody came to know in remote Maharashtra that somebody in Bengal published a new genre, a new kind of text, a new kind of writing called a novel, Upanyas. And then finding it very new, they rendered it into Marathi. Now this is something which has been happening in India a lot. Uh, I remember my friend Ayappa Panikar took me aside when I went to read poetry in Thrissur, and he said that, can you tell me how many books of Bengali do we have in Malayalam? I said, I don't know. I have no idea. Then he took me to the book exhibition and showed me a large number of books, all translated from so many very able translators like Nilima Ibrahim from Bengali into Malayalam. Now, this is something which is peculiar of India. The challenge of homogenization that we face today sometimes, it's very dangerous because it comes with a package deal. The package deal is you have to carry with it the globalization. So they are trying to destroy our landscape, linguistic landscape, our intercultural heritage. So I would say that the task of responsible social policy would be to work on this large reservoir of languages in India. The paradigm of translatability, therefore, is very important. I would therefore, when I was creating this CALS Hyderabad, my reason for putting an equal emphasis on linguistic and translation was that these are the two methods, these are the two tools for all of us to create our linguistic landscape. And that can happen only through integration. Now, a lot of people tell me, sir, why there should be conflict? Why should a language fight with another language? Why should there be fight between the states and the center, sometimes between one state and another state on language issue? I would say that we'll look in a large space like India, which is almost like a continent, when a social system is evolving, the institutional links have to develop and stabilize, bringing in a web of interdependence. We cannot do without each other. Today, if somebody is looking for an option in food, then today we have to decide, are we going to go for a Bengali cuisine today? Are we going to go for a cuisine which is in North India? Or are we going to have a food which is typical Dravidian food? Because, we have so many options in India. Anyone who tries to look for writing and models, methods, some model writers who are our ideal, creative people, we always look for somebody else. So therefore, we are used to that way, and we do not mind if there is a story which is coming in as a film initially in Tamil, then it gets into Kannada, then it comes to Marathi, then it becomes a Hindi film and becomes a big hit. This is a typical thing. This is a typical India, which is not to be surprised about. And people from outside are very surprised. How is it that we are surviving with so many different cultures and communities and languages? So there is a dialectical linkage between this integration and conflict. Sometimes integration can occur only when there is a conflict situation. Conversely, there are other times where conflict becomes necessary to reach an integration. So it's natural that this large country would go through these cycles over different period of time to draw up its linguistic landscape. In any civil society paradigm, the role of state will be to bring in a kind of balance, not disrupt balance. And that is the lesson for many new and emerging nation states. Thank you very much for being very patient about my talk. I did not want to take up too much of space and too much of time. I thought that the most important thing is to talk about how exactly we are managing ourselves, how is it that we should be managing ourselves, and how do we design our language landscape in a complicated plural scenario. We do not need to go for monolingualism, monoculturalism. We are good as we are, and we'll be always better, because there was a time in 1970s when there were some social linguists who said that your country is going to be economically backward because you speak so many languages, because you have so many cultures, you can't manage yourself. Today, if you look at the Indian economy, of course, COVID situation has created problems for everybody, not for us alone, also for the US economy, also for Chinese economy. But Indian economy before that had been doing reasonably well, going from strength to strength. And in spite of the fact that we speak so many languages, we write in so many languages, we make so many different kind of films, etc., etc. And this is common thing. We have a lot of very good Bengali singers originally from Kolkata, who are very popular as the Tamil singers in the films, highly respected as Malayalam singers in the films. We have people like Lata Mangeshkar singing Bengali songs, singing languages which are spoken in different parts of the country. This is common thing. This is nothing which is uncommon. Therefore, our language landscape has to be plural. Thank you very much.
Renagadevi madam, you can proceed.
If there are questions or comments, I'll be happy to answer.
Please, Renagadevi madam, you can unmute. Okay. You can proceed the program.
Thank you, Prof. We will start provoking lecture. Now, some questions from the audience, one by one.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Yes, please.
Questions? Or any clarification? Dear participants, do you have any questions? Hello? Hello?
Hello. Please.
Any questions?
Please, KK sir, Professor Karnagaran sir.
Okay.
Please.
Please.
Hello.
Yes, Professor Karnagaran.
Yeah. Thank you for presenting our invitation and request deliver an address or a lecture. And I'm happy that you have chosen an interesting topic for linguistic landscape. So I think, and you are the first scholar to explain your language planning process in a wider way. covering, I think, historical, social, linguistic, literary content from various languages of India, especially the Aryan and the Dravidian and other languages. It was quite interesting that you have given us avenues and areas so that our researcher can select a couple of them quite easily, and also they can work on some of the issues, some of the problems. It's not that easy to do research covering multilingual setup in multilingual context. So they have to choose an area that is more important from the point of view of communication and also from the point of view of language planning. Multilingualism is very complex these days. It approaches the issues through different policies of the government and also the state governments have their own proposals. So it's very difficult. Quite often the policies are changed without consulting the people or those who are in the different areas of education or media or other types of language use. So it has become very complex these days to plan the use of language in a particular state with particular reference to the multilingual context. So my request to young researchers, they should take up research involving the current problems. You see, policy makers, they have their own views, but at the same time, they don't want to take our instructions, our advice, or our suggestions in planning for better use, better language use, made for the students, researchers, common people, media, and so on. So my request is that they should come forward to suggest areas, sub-areas, whatever you call it. So, and initiate good research with particular reference to the use of languages, Indian languages, at least the 22 languages, and also the languages used as medium of instruction in our higher education. Higher education is suffering a lot these days. One language, all one. But I don't know how to plan all these things. It's very important. It's not that easy to plan the language in a multilingual context. There are a number of problems, complex problems. So I think you have your lecture has given us different areas in the area of values and.
Yeah. Hello.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, I think the comment was very valuable. There were two questions that I see on the board, on the chat board. One is, how do we see multilingual education? Do I support multilingual education? Another question is, what can we do for the minority languages education? Well, both are interesting questions. I would say that already multilingualism is built into our education system. If you look at our languages, look at our schools, they already teach the international language, the language which is state official language, and the language which is widely understood or officially used by the government of India. So that is already done. As far as the minority languages are concerned, that's an area of concern, that nothing much is being done, although there is constitutional provision, there's already a commissioner for linguistic minorities, there are complaints going, but nothing much is happening there. I can talk about this in some other day, in some other session, but that is something which is very important.
Thank you, Professor. Is there any other question?
Can I say something? I am Professor Rajarama from University of Hyderabad.
Proceed, madam.
Sir, nice to hear you after a very long time, sir. This is Rajarama.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering because, of course, I came for the lecture late and I missed quite some part of your talk. I was just wondering about, don't you think that there is, when you said that two languages compete with each other, I think that's the one of these things. There is an inherent hierarchy that the society has towards the languages. In a multilingual society, it is one language that we use more, much more than other languages, because when you think of the official communication, it is always in either in English or Hindi as against the local languages, and then local languages for other functions of use. That is one thing. And what role, I mean, in education planning, not only the minority languages, today I find that even a major language like Telugu is at risk, because it's being taken away as medium of instruction. And the education policies, the 3-language formula and all these are ideally there, but then the mother tongue medium of instruction and the local language and languages, like a major language like Telugu is also threatened, because of the state policies to replace it with English. So under these conditions, as a linguist, I feel that, what is the role of a linguist? Are we consulted at all when language planning happens, or how does language planning take place? And do we have something like a language planning in India at all? This is my thing.
Well, I would, Rajaram, I understood. Let me answer very briefly because the time must be running out.
Yes.
The point is that there should be also language movement along with language planning. I said that from top to bottom you plan, and from bottom to top also you resent and you plan. So a lot of planning is to be done by the parents. A lot of planning, because if there are very large number of Telugu parents who are very, very, protestive about the kind of wrong decision, within quote wrong decision taken by the state government, then I'm sure they will come out on the street and make the protests possible. And if this happens, there will be change. If all of us accept whatever is imposed upon us by people who do not understand value multilingualism, then there is a problem. We should not accept everything uncritically. That is the problem. So language planning is not just something which has to be done by people from top. Language planning also needs to be taken up by the parents from the bottom.
Okay, sir. Sir, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can I have one question?
Okay.
Sir, this is Balasubramanian, sir. Thank you very much for an excellent speech. Sir, you were referring to Professor Kupchandani's model, and you also mentioned about emphasis on different languages, on, for example, some Sakitya Academy or radio or some such a way, and at the same time, different languages for different roles, they are competing for recognition. How are we going to address this issue? Because at different levels, they are competing for different recognition. How are we going to address it?
Well, this is a very complicated question, and it doesn't have a very simple answer, because it so happens that right from classical languages recognition to other kinds of recognition, I've been part of the government committees and I know how things work. But the issue is a lot of this recognition would come if there is a lot of merit in the proposal. If there is a lot of struggle that is exhibited very clearly from the speech community, from the literary community, then naturally there will be some effort for people to recognize it. So important thing is to not to really be complacent about it, but to make the demand. So it's possible in a democracy, nothing comes only through court, only through the government. A lot of things happen also because of the demands of the people. So if you did not demand certain things, you will not never get it. Because there was a demand for Konkani, because there was a demand for various other languages like Santhali or Bodo, the demands were met with. This is very important. Therefore, these movements for languages will have to be seen in a positive manner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There are a few questions in the chat box. Do you like to answer them?
Which are the other questions?
One is from on the chat board. There are two questions.
Okay. Yes.
Are you able to see that?
I can see there is one question which is asked by Lakshmi Priya, which is talking about language conflicts and what about the migrant minority languages.
Yeah.
This is very crucial. And as you know, roughly 15 to 20% of Indians are always on the move. If you look at entire India, you will find that very large number of migrant speakers, speech community people, because of the livelihood, because to get better life, etc., they shift and migrate to other places. Now, what happens is there is peer pressure. Your children, you are a Tamilian settled in Kolkata. Your children can choose. You can choose your children, send your children to Tamil medium school. You may have some very rarely one or two such schools in Kolkata, or you may decide to send them to other schools. The moment you send them to the other schools, there is this peer pressure from the other school children, classmates, etc. And there they make those compromises. They may come back home and speak to you in your own language, but they would be more comfortable speaking in the language of the friends, languages used in the school, etc., etc. So they become naturally bilingual. And this is a typical situation that happens with the migrant minority speech communities. Wherever the major language groups have gone, there is always an attempt that if there is no school which is teaching through their own mother tongue, then at least there should be a community school, Saturday school, some community or society-driven attempts to teach them in their own heritage language. And I think that should also be encouraged. A lot of misconceptions are there that if you put a child or expose a child to 4 languages, the child will collapse. Nothing happens. A child is able to speak so many languages very naturally. Only thing is that the child should be exposed.
Shall I ask one question?
Is there anybody?
Shall I ask one question?
Any questions? Any more questions?
Yes. Shall I ask one question? Person one.
Please.
Please proceed.
Good evening, sir. I am Dr. Pasumban from CAL, sir. Regarding language planning, is it audible, sir?
Yes, it's audible.
Yes, audible. Be brief.
Regarding language planning, the official language status for the constitutionally recognized language. What is the problem to recognize these 22 languages for official language? Because in some classical language, at least some classical language may be recognized for the official status in India. So if you take the case of Singapore, Malaysia, and Sri Lanka, the classical language Tamil is recognized there as an official language. Why government of India to take at least these 22 languages in constitutional recognized languages or classical languages like Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, like that? What is the problem in recognizing the languages, these languages for
Be brief.
Next question.
We are running out of time. Be brief.
Okay, one question. Okay, over. Professor, you can answer first.
Well, I think the answer to that is very difficult to give in 1 minute. I would ask you to urge you to write to me an email so that I can discuss it over email.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor.
Ramamurthy wants to speak. Madam,
Professor Udayana Singh, thank you very much, first of all, for accepting our invitation. And as usual, you are the only linguist who can integrate the literature with the language planning, starting from Rig Veda and Mahabharata. How the points you take points from that and explain the multilingualism and language planning. My question is not question. There is always a conflict between the top-down approach and also bottom-up approach in planning. Even though in the recent language planning, the educational policy of the government, there are lots of scope for introducing mother tongue and also integrating lots of languages or encouraging multilingualism. But when you take care of the aspiration of the people, it is always in opposition to that. They wanted to educate their children through the language which gives them economic benefit. And how do how can we bridge this kind of conflicts?
No, I know that Dr. Ramamurthy, the main issue is that economics of the society will definitely be a problem which parents will have to deal with. And there are many models available. People like me who studied only through Bangla medium schools, who were not able to speak in English even as we entered colleges, I don't think we are doing so badly compared to those who went to the purely English medium schools. It's a question of attitude. And the parents will have to be encouraged to look at the models, that there are a very large number of people who are not necessarily exposed as a child to A for apple and B for ball, and yet they do well in so many languages. So it's only lack of confidence in our system, in our languages, that is responsible for this. There are many other questions on the chat board, but I can't take all of them. I hope to be able to answer them separately at some other point of time.
Madam, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Madam, Prem wants to speak, madam.
Okay. Prem, proceed.
Prem Kumar.
Sir, already I have asked a question and he replied for that also. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, the final one from me. Nowadays, we are able to hear the One India slogan. Is it possible in this multicultural, multilingual nation?
Well, I would say that we don't talk about many Indias.
Yeah.
We always talk about, in terms of politics, in terms of the international politics, we talk about one India. But when it comes to culture, then there are many Indias anyway. Whether you like it or not, we have many Indian foods, many Indian dresses, many Indian music, many Indian cinema, many Indian literature. Who denies that? Nobody can deny that. So that's the difference between the concept of one India and many India. I think we are going to live with this conflict for a long time.
Madam, sorry for the disturbance. Before vote of thanks, Professor Karnagaran wants to speak some things. Professor Karnagaran, sir.
Yeah. No, just I wanted to give 1 or 2 points for the consideration of researchers and land planners at the state level, and also in different domains. I think Dr. Uday has given a very wider map to choose some of the areas, minority languages, official languages, and so on. So we have to work on independent projects, especially the linguistic departments or language departments, in association with different social sciences, and see that we come with some proposals, so that we can submit it to the government of India, government of Tamil Nadu, or government of West Bengal, and so on, so that they can understand the problems and do something for the upliftment of language use in the respective states, and also cooperate with the center in the sense that the language policies which we enact to be useful for the society throughout India. Because in order to solve some of the multilingual problems, it becomes necessary, essential, this moment of time, to see that we undertake serious research so that we can suggest it to the government to improve the status planning, because without the government, I don't think we can easily solve the language policies, problems because of language policies. However, we have to do work with the partners, not a large number of areas, work and collect materials and see that languages can be better utilized, used in coming years for the betterment of the society in different formal domains at least. Okay, this is what I wanted to what is going on in the Indian multilingual context. The universities, I don't think we go deeper into the problems. That's clear. And so, with this,
Pasumban. Excuse me, Pasumban, please.
Motivated young researchers, and also given some areas so that the senior researchers can work with them in those areas and come out with some useful findings, observations, so that we can help our central government making language policies and language materials useful for different societies. This, I thank all of you for raising your suggestions, coming out with suggestions and your questions. Thank you very much.
So, are you going to answer?
No. Let's go.
No, there is no answer. It's only comment.
Okay. What are the?
Okay, sir. If there are no other questions, I will call Dr. Selvakumar to express a formal vote of thanks. Dr. Selvakumar, are you able to hear me? Kamachi?
Selvakumar, yes, madam.
Dr. Selvakumar.
Selvakumar?
Okay.
Dr. Selvakumar?
Dr. Selvakumar?
Rena madam, you can propose vote of thanks.
Okay. Professor Udayanarayan Singh. I am very thankful to you on behalf of Tamil Mozhiyiyal Sangam and other organizers of Tamil Mozhiyiyal Sangam on this series of lectures. I would like to thank you and wholeheartedly. It is a very inspiring lecture. Even though our country is a multilingual, multicultural country, the language planning is a very difficult one for all of us. So even then we are talking about language planning and other things. Thank you, sir, for sharing your...
I'm in the link. Sir, I am in the
You are
link.
in link.
Madam.
Okay, okay.
Please.
Yes,
Selvakumar is on the
Okay,
line.
yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. Dr. Selvakumar.
evening.
Dr. Selvakumar.
Good evening, every one of you, to take part in this weekly lecture series 4. So first of all, I should thank to the President of Tamil Linguistics Forum, Professor Karnagaran, for his very dynamic and active participation in this. And I would thank the Secretary, Professor Balasubramaniam, Vice Chancellor of Tamil University, and the admin, Dr. Kamachi, for creating such an opportunity to listen students like me, Dr. Arumali and all here, to listen such a very Professor Udayanarayan Singh. And I must record my sincere thanks to conduct this webinar, Madam. And really, we enjoy. So after a long time, so you just made an opportunity for us to listen Professor's speech. So I just remember when we were all in his class, 91, 92, the way which he handled the class and also the language which he uses, very easily communicative, and always his speech has dynamic connection with the concept. So now I feel and I realize, thank you very much, sir, for having accepted and deliver a very wonderful speech in the weekly lecture series. Thank you very much, sir. And I thank, there were many questions and sharing also their opinions. Orderly Professor Karnagaran and Dr. Rajirama and Professor Balasubramaniam and Lakshmi Priya and Dr. Pasumban and Dr. Ramamurthy and Dr. Prem and Madam Renuka Devi for your questions and sharing your opinion. And Dr. Rangan and other professors in India and also overseas. So thank every one of you for taking part in this. And I should not forget to thank the participants, the scholars, the budding linguists, budding scholars of Tamil literature and linguistics who have taken part in this webinar. And probably they would have understood what Professor Udayanarayan Singh is trying to let us understand. I hope that this will be a very thought-provoking to understand, to know, to get more knowledge about the multilingualism. And really it is first lessons in language planning. So we are very grateful to you, sir. And I thank every one of you to take part in this webinar. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks, one and all. Thank you very much for the opportunity to the everyone. And finally, I should again and again, I just wanted to thank Professor Udayanarayan Singh on behalf of the Tamil Linguistics Forum for having accepted our invitation. Despite you have a tight schedule. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you one and all. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. It is my pleasure to close that session, which is inspiring lecture to all. Thank you all.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello. Sir?
Hello.
Sir,